45 minutes.
Great.
An hour with interruptions. Section 1, 1870 to 1918. This is called the Age of Optimism. This is the Europe's got it going on kind of phase. Material base. All right. First thing. They had great wealth. They had world domination. They had reform and democratic movements. They had industrial growth. And they had science and technology. Their material base. Great wealth, world domination, reform and democratic movements, industrial growth, science and technology. Non-material base, national consciousness, the ideals of democracy, art, and literature. Anytime you see a period of peace and prosperity, you generally see an outburst of culture. Literature, philosophy, music, whatever the case may be. Age of omens. This is the sign that this foundation of prosperity and peace was shaking. Number 1, alliances. Remember? Started out with Bismarck's alliances, which were good, like the Three Emperors League and the Reinsurance Treaty and the Dual Alliance, but then eventually was going to degenerate into Triple Alliance, and then Anglo-Russian Entente, and then Entente Cordiale, and then eventually Triple Alliance. They prepared for confrontation. Conflict was inevitable. You don't choose sides and then not play the game. What was that quote I had before? I have to remember it. It's good. All right, number 2, imperialism. Imperialism taught them that 1, you had a customary use of force, competition, a superiority complex, and nationalistic pride. The most dangerous version of nationalism is the us versus them. You could almost call imperialism like an exhibition season for World War I. Number 3, militarism. You can see this with naval arms race between Britain and Germany in particular. A, preparedness for war, an arms race, a large reservoir of trained troops, naval competition, new developments in weaponry, like using science and technological progress to improve weaponry. Okay? Industrialism. This is the next omen. Number 1, profit that can be generated from the arms race. Sometimes we call it the military-industrial complex. Competition. My favorite Austin Powers one. Fear of being number 2. The need for war to detract from the growth of socialism. Remember, we called it the domestic political diversion. And the need to ensure markets and resources. Nationalism. That's the last of the omen. Exaggerated love for country. Implied hatred of other nations. Sometimes they call it jingoism or xenophobia. Competition, again. The desire for national self-determination, especially among the Slavs. That's the Balkan powder keg. Okay? And then the C point is saying major wars fought by Europeans from 1950 to the outbreak. I'm going to try to list them in order, if I can. The first one is the Crimean War. That is 1853 to 56. The 7 Weeks War. Remember, that was Austria versus Prussia, I guess. 1866. The Franco-Prussian War, 1870 to 71. The Russo-Turkish War, 1877 and 8. The Zulu Wars, which were in the 1870s and 80s. The Boer War, 1899 to 1902. Boer, B-O-E-R. They were fighting over what was ultimately South Africa. 1899 to 1902. The Russo-Japanese War, 1904 to 1905. And the Balkan Wars.
What were the years for the Russo-Japanese War?
1904 to 1905, and then the Balkan Wars were 1911 and 12, 1912 and 13, and then the third one is started in 1914. It's called World War I.
What was the date of the 7 Weeks War?
My guess is 1866, but I could be wrong there. That's when Bismarck was trying to consolidate Germany by manipulating Austria into a war.
What was Franklin Prussia?
1870 and 71. Okay, so lots of wars. They're getting a lot of practice. All right. D, causes of the new imperialism. Remember, new imperialism generally falls into the time period 1870 to 1914, which happens to fit with this age of optimism. It's also the age of imperialism. Economic causes. A, the need for markets. All the things that the acquisition of colonies would provide. Markets, cheap and available labor, potential natural resources that one might have a deficit in, and being able to expand your surplus. Political, the need for international prestige. Remember that the Congo was going to add like 64 times the amount of real estate to Belgium with its acquisition. Social. Number one, take up the white man's burden. Resettle surplus population. Add one more to the political for me, if you will, and that is the need to distract from domestic conflicts and uprisings. Number four is defense, which is the southern way of saying defense. The need for strategic maple and coaling stations. Nationalism, again. Prestige. Look at all of our territory. Desire to curtail others from taking real estate. You get there before they do. Literally, it's like Wile E. Coyote when he sees the Roadrunner. Puts the bib on, knife in one hand, fork in the other. Africa and Asia then become the Roadrunner. All right, imperialism at work. In China, the one term that they gave you was extraterritoriality. But remember, it was what we call the period of unequal treaties. So you could say the Treaty of Nanking, Treaty of, I think it's Tientsin, ended the 2 Opium Wars. Then you had the open door policy, which is literally like the scramble for Africa. This one was the scramble for China. In Africa, you had outright annexation. Or the 2 states that were not annexed. Ethiopia and
Liberia.
Liberia. Everything else was controlled. Latin America, you had economic control. That's American-style imperialism. You don't colonize, you don't annex, you just control their economy and manipulate their politics. The Ottoman Empire was political manipulation. Remember the Ottomans and the Egyptians, it was kind of the same tale. The Russians and the Chinese had a similar tale. India and Egypt kind of had a similar tale. Japan was the one that kind of, if you can't beat them, join them. All right, terms. Revisionist Marxism. This is, remember, ballot socialism. Adapting Marx's ideas to existing political structures, meaning working from within, not trying to violently overthrow. For example, forming political parties, shifting from bullets to ballots. Let's see who's paying attention. What was the ballot socialist party in Germany called?
Social Democrats.
Social Democrats, good. What was the ballot socialist party in France?
Hang on.
Oh,
What were they called? No,
I'm sad.
hang on. I'm thinking.
United Socialists. What was the ballot socialist in Britain? The Fabian became the Labour Party. Good. All right. Social Darwinism. Using Darwin's ideas to justify European domination over others and the bourgeois domination over the working class. The Second Industrial Revolution and corporate growth. This is sort of like the same time period, but they call it a Second Industrial Revolution. The consolidation of companies into corporations. The dominance of finance capitalism. And a truly urban society. And then they give you three thinkers. Number one, Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis. Emphasized sexual instincts. Attempted to apply a scientific base to the operation of the human mind. But also remember, Freud's a departure. Freud's the one that told us that man's inherent rationality ought to be challenged. Remember id, ego, superego? All right, there's three works that you can write down if you feel like it. We're probably going to address them again next week, but if you want to write them down now, you can. The first is called Three Theories of Sexuality. Number one or two is called The Interpretation of Dreams. And the third is called Civilization and Its Discontents. And that's the most important one. That's the one that talks about how the superego can overwhelm the id. And that's where neuroses comes from. Carl Jung. For Jung, you can write this. Just remember the two terms. One is called archetypes, and the other is called the collective unconscious. And then I would also write, had a theistic approach to psychoanalysis. Like acknowledge that religion played a role in people's minds. And then Einstein, just, new physics or theory of relativity. All right, then we've got a little chart on World War I think. After causes, let's give you we've already given you the causes, but we'll write them again. Why the hell not? As long as you know them, you know them. Of course. Yeah. I mean, we're going to get to a place where, yeah, we'll be done very fast here. Okay. Causes alliances, imperialism, militarism, nationalism, industrialism. Those are all long-term causes. Short-term, write this. In the summer of 1914, unreasonable militaristic forces outmaneuvered traditional reasonable diplomacy. Outmaneuvered traditional reasonable diplomacy. Wilhelmian ideals trump Bismarckian ideals. And then the chart. These are impacts for England, France, Germany, Russia, US of A. All right. Political. We're going to go across. Okay, so in England, you write down politically that their empire enlarged. France, write empire enlarged. And then also insecurity complex. I don't know if that's political. That's just what it was. Germany lost. Russia.
Wait, that was it.
They lost territory.
Okay.
Russia lost territory, had a revolution, and the USA returned to isolation, went back into hibernation for another 20 years. Okay. Economic consequences for England. I would just write near financial ruin, large unemployment. France cycled into bankruptcy. Germany, chaos, economic chaos saddled with war debt. Russia, they went commie. Red. Scared Missourians. USA, the creditor and money center of the world.
Money what?
The money center of the world. USA in the 20s is like the Netherlands in the mid-1600s. Socially, England had class tension. France had a republic that teetered between left center and right center political parties. The Weimar Republic in Germany, discredited from the beginning for signing Versailles, but end of monarchy. Russia, they ended monarchy, created the SSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, brought all the multinational aspects of their empire together. USA, disillusionment with war and rejection of the League of Nations. Disillusionment with war, rejection of League of Nations. Okay. All right, and this section is the Russian Revolution. The first one is nature of the Tsarist regime. 4 things. 1, harsh. 2, incompetent. 3, preposterous. Okay, that must be the Rasputin phase. 4, out of touch with the times. Revolution of 1905. Remember I told you that that was Russia's 1848 revolution. Popular uprising against government led to Bloody Sunday, which revealed the reactionary nature of the regime. And the revolution was not transformative because the army remained loyal to the Tsar, and the Tsar promised constitutional reforms. Was not transformative because the army remained loyal to the Tsar, and the Tsar promised constitutional reforms. It was called the October Manifesto. Stolypin reforms. Remember Peter Stolypin? He's a guy that was their finance minister prior to World War I. Passed what's called the Agrarian Reform Act of 1906. He attempted to place private property in peasants' hands and it was a liberal cookie attempt to bolster the Tsar's support, if you will. All right, then we have the February-March Revolution of 1917. Chaos in the capital, kind of like very similar to the storming of the Bastille, except that you had it in St. Petersburg or Petrograd. Collapsed Romanov rule. All right, and then the chain in number 5 is this. Number 1, Lenin's return. That was the April Theses, which occurred in April. Number 2, the Kornilov affair. Followed by 3, the October-November Revolution or the Bolshevik Revolution. Followed by the creation of Cheka, C-H-E-K-A, the secret police. Followed by the Red Army. Followed by red success over white in Civil War. Followed by war communism replaced by new economic policy. And that gives you number 1 on the next page. New economic policy, the NEP. The failure of war communism led to accommodation with capitalism. Lenin called it 1 step backward to go 2 steps forward. The economy revived to pre-war level by 1926. And then Stalin set in. Number 2, the Soviet attitude towards the church. Number 1, this is a confrontation between traditional Christianity and atheism. The Marxist thesis was that religion was the opiate of the masses, as well as the belief that the church was tied to the Romanov autocracy. And then number 3 is Stalin steps towards totalitarianism. Number 1, eliminate Trotsky. 2, 5-year plans, which included the collectivization of agriculture and the persecution of the peasant landowners known as the kulaks, followed by the Great Purges. Okay? Lenin's alteration of Marxism, we talked about this. Remember that it included 2 things. One is from a work called What is to be Done, which said revolutionary vanguard. You needed an elite group of dedicated communists to bring the masses along for the ride. Number 2, that you could have in 2 tactics for social democracy, an urban uprising and a rural uprising dedicated to the ideals of Marxism. And then Stalin modified Lenin by A, exclusive control by one individual over the party, and the cult of personality. All right. C. Moving right along. But once we get to these terms, man, we're home free. So we're almost there, guys. Number C. 1, definition. Complete domination of all aspects of human life by the state. Complete domination of all aspects of human life by the state. Not merely the political. It is meant to be a permanent societal phenomenon rather than an emergency measure. Or we called it the doctrine of permanent revolution. Once one task is achieved, you move on to the next one. It's as if you're taking the wartime mentality and applying it to peacetime. 2, totalitarianism of the right. Hitler's Germany stressed a vertical nationalistic society. Totalitarianism of the left is Stalin's Soviet Union, stressing a worldwide classless society. No class. The results are the same. The results are the same, although the ideologies differ. Okay? And then the phenomenon known as the collapse of democracies from 1919 to 1939. The first justification is that some collapsed from lack of tradition. For example, Eastern Europe. Others collapsed because of the economic strain of World War I and the Great Depression, like Italy, Germany, Spain, Portugal. All right, major steps in the collapse of German democracy and the rise of Nazism. 1, no tradition of democracy in Germany. 2, Article 231, the War Guilt Clause. 3, war reparations and inflation. 4, the ineffectiveness of the Weimar Republic. 5, the crash of 1929. 6, the intense revival of nationalism. And 7, the need for protection from the outside. The belief that it's you against the world. All right? This is saying compare Vienna, Versailles, and Yalta. First of all, Vienna is 1814-15, Versailles is 1918-19, and Yalta is 1945. Vienna was a negotiated peace treaty. Versailles and Yalta were dictated terms of peace. And according to Versailles and Yalta, losers were criminals, whereas Vienna saw the vanquished as part of the traditional fabric of European society. Whatever they knew in 1814, they forgot in 1918. That's what Keynes was trying to say. You need Germany. Don't treat them bad. They might get ornery and make them sad. Sounds like a country song. Don't treat Germany bad. All right. Here we go. All right. We have about 40 terms, and we're going to book right through them. You guys ready? Let's go.
Y'all got this.
Bring out your hands and let's go.
Vienna.
1814 to 15.
All right, guys, we got this.
All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. All right, number one, League of Nations. A collective security plan for resolving international problems. A collective security plan for resolving international problems. And then write down toothless. It was. Toothless. 2, Rapallo. Probably don't know this one. Rapallo was 1923. Nations gathered to discuss armaments and their distribution and made agreements on the Italian-Yugoslav border. They gathered to discuss armaments and their distribution, made agreements on the Italian-Yugoslav border. Locarno, 25, 1925. Agreements on the reduction of weapons and the recognition of existing borders by Germany, France, Belgium, and Luxembourg. Remember, who are the two key ministers in this little thing?
Was one stress?
One was Stressman, the other was the Frenchman, Aristide Briand. Dawes Plan, 1924. U.S. proposal for economic restructuring of Germany. U.S. proposal for economic restructuring of Germany. U.S. provides loans to Germany. Germany builds industry, uses money to pay off loans to France and Britain. They build industry, use that money to pay off loans to the U.S. U.S. pays itself, but you get the wheel spinning. Kellogg-Briand. Hippie Pact. International agreement to outlaw war and save the whales. Okay, popular fronts. Popular fronts are coalitions of left and center against the right, especially in France and Spain. The Third Reich. Bless you. Hitler's 1,000-year Germany, 1933 to 45.
Came a bit short.
Came up a little bit short. Franco, right-wing victor of Spanish Civil War, established fascist regime. Francisco is his first name. Anschluss, unification of Germany and Austria. Munich. Last Allied effort to appease Hitler, but it is the very symbol of appeasement. The Anti-Comintern Pact is sometimes called the Triple Axis. Okay. Anti-Comintern Pact is sometimes just called the Triple Axis, German, Italian, Japanese Alliance, or Rome, Berlin, Tokyo Axis. Anti-communist. Nazi-Soviet Pact. 10-year non-aggression pact between Soviet Union and Germany, 1939 to 41. Should be a pattern. The Atlanta Charter is the basis for post-war world order, based to some extent on Wilson's 14 points. Basis for post-war world order, based to some extent on Wilson's 14 points. Pearl Harbor. Stalingrad. Soviet victory over Nazis that dispelled the myth of their invincibility, turned war in favor of allies. D-Day. Yalta. Designed for conclusion of war, a plan for Soviet entry into war in Far East after conclusion of European war, and proposals for post-war political adjustments. San Francisco, UN, another crack at collective security. Potsdam, final solution of European borders and unkept promises of post-war elections. Beginning of tension between US and USSR. Nuremberg, trial of German political, civil, and military leaders for war crimes. And then Cold War. Allied powers made up of left and center had succeeded in eliminating the right, Nazi Germany and Japan, but now came apart. Left and center allied against right, Nazi Germany and Japan, now came apart. Truman Doctrine. U.S. military aid to oppose the spread of communism in Greece and Turkey, and the end of U.S. peacetime isolation. Marshall Plan. I don't know if you need dates for these. Truman Doctrine's 47, Marshall Plan's 48. U.S. economic aid to combat spread of communism in Western Europe. About $13 billion. Common Form. Don't know why that's on there, but Soviet Union's active promotion of communist regimes. NATO. This is 1949, a military response to aggressive Soviet moves. Warsaw Pact, a military alliance of Soviet Union and Eastern European states to offset influence of NATO. So Soviets and Eastern Europe offset NATO. And the problem with divided Germany is the isolation of West Berlin with no land communication with the rest of Germany. All right, 17 more. Number 1, China. China, you had a communist takeover in 1949. Mao over Chiang, 5-0. Korea, communist North Korean invasion of South led to first sizable military action between left and center. Left is Soviet Union, the center is U.S. and allies. Japan, enforced Western-style democracy prevented Russian participation. India achieved self-determination from British Empire. Partition of India and Pakistan. Growth of socialism and military dictatorships. Middle East. Endless Arab-Israeli tension. Establishment of Israel rejected by Islamic world. Vietnam, end of French colonialism. Communist flavor led to U.S. intervention. No bueno. Africa, decolonization, and many, many problems. All right, and then 10 more terms. Number 1, Holocaust. Number 2, the common market, the creation of European economic unity. All right, we've gone over this a number of times. You ought to be able to tell me the Schuman Plan. You ought to tell me what the UECSC is. You should know about the Treaty of Rome. You should know about the Six. You should know who was included as they moved forward. You should know about Maastricht in 1992, the creation of the EU. Vatican II, I didn't talk about this, but this is in the 1960s. It is a Roman Catholic dialogue with the world. And the person that was most symbolic of Vatican II was Pope John the 23rd, who was the coolest pope of the 20th century, and looks like Francis is going to be the coolest pope in the 21st century. John the 23rd proposed spirit of openness and accommodation while urging peace on earth. Pacem and terris or something like that. Peace on earth. Existentialism, a philosophy that holds that human experience is the only reality. I liked our version better, that the world is absurd and provides no universal prescriptions, that life must be derived of meaning internally. 6, SALT, S-A-L-T, Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. Attempts made between U.S. and USSR to limit strategic arms. SALT was the 70s, START was the 80s. Détente, gradual relaxation of Cold War. Can somebody give me 3 things that would be in a détente paragraph on an essay?
Salt.
SALT. Somebody say Nixon? Nixon visiting China. Willy Brandt and Ostpolitik. Give me the 4th. The Kellogg-Briand of the 70s.
Helsinki.
Helsinki, good. All right, glasnost and perestroika, those are the two Gorby terms you need to know. Glasnost is openness and dialogue. Perestroika is economic restructuring. And then 1989, Gorbachev's ideas spread and communist regimes were challenged and in most cases fell. In fact, all cases. And that, my friends, is the end of Review 2.
All right, we're rolling. You missed nothing.
All right, we're going to get started.
Guys,
All right, right this. Methods used by each for the following. Methods used by each of the following to create a nation state. It's time, kids. Let's go. Number 1, Cavour. Methods. Manipulative wars and diplomacy. Everybody should know who these people are. Bismarck. More manipulative wars and better diplomacy. Alexander II. Just write freed serfs, sort of. Franz Joseph, a creation of dual monarchy. That's the Austria-Hungary thing, known as Ausgleich.
Wait, what's
Or
French?
Gleich.
French is Just
Franz Joseph, creation of dual monarchy, 1867, Ausgleich. I don't know why they put Lincoln in here, but Civil War. And Mutsuhito. Does anybody know? How did Mutsuhito forge Japan around the same time period? The Meiji Restoration. You guys should know what that is.
How do you spell that?
M-E-I-J-I.
Good job.
All right, next. Major effects of 19th century industrialization. Politically, it did this. 1, it grew the influence and power of the bourgeoisie. Grew influence and power of the bourgeoisie. It extended suffrage. Remember, suffrage is merely the right to vote. Just because it looks like suffering doesn't mean that it is. Impressive. Did you get a little 5,000 calorie snack pack there, Kyle?
I got 8 engines. A lot.
All right. Okay, so we are on, for those of you that arrived, we are on effects of industrialization political. We've so far got growing influence and power of the bourgeoisie, extended suffrage, and the gradual governmental response to the plight of the workers. Still under political. The gradual governmental response to the plight of the workers. Economic, you got tremendous growth of capital, mass production, and the penetration of the world for markets and resources. And then social, you have mass societies, like urbanization, new social divisions between rich and poor, or what characterizes as rich and poor. The greater social importance of the bourgeoisie as the new aristocrats, the titans of industry. All right, as far as B is concerned, the economic philosophy of industrial capitalism. What what it says there is that industrial nation states, particularly like a Britain or a France or a Germany, adopted a philosophy of economic liberalism. That's the Adam Smith version, which was further strengthened by the ideas of social Darwinism in the late 19th century. Everybody know what social Darwinism is? It's the taking that section, survival of the fittest, and applying it to business or people or nations or whatever the case may be.
Could you repeat the first part of that?
Yeah, industrial nation states adopted the philosophy of economic liberalism, Smith, which was further strengthened by the ideas of social Darwinism, Spencer, in the late 19th century. Those that contributed to the theory of industrial capitalism, they give you three names there. One is Adam Smith. Everybody should write down The Wealth of Nations, 1776. It's a really important work. Gave us the idea of laissez-faire. Ricardo, just all you need to remember is iron law of wages. The idea that if wages go down, or wages are artificially increased, like through, for instance, minimum wage laws, Ricardo believes that ultimately the excess monies that the working class accumulates will only be spent producing more children, which will then increase the labor supply, which will drive down the demand for labor, which will Malthus's essay on populations. Remember merely that the population ultimately was going to outgrow the food supply. That was the fear. This is from Essay on Population, 1798. All right, last thing is IDs, and then there's a chart, and we'll book through the chart pretty fast. So, the Anti-Corn Law League was English liberals intent on eliminating the tariff on grain and instituting free trade. Everybody should remember what the corn laws were. English liberals intent on eliminating the tariff on grain and instituting free trade. These are like, the next four things are English things. The next one's the Factory Act of 1833. It limited the workday for children under 18 and mandated education for children under 9. Thank God for that. But those 10-year-olds, damn it. Reform Bill of 1832 shifted control of the House of Commons to the commercial and industrial middle class. Shifted control of the House of Commons to the commercial and industrial middle class. It did this by enfranchising the middle class and reapportioning commons. You remember they got rid of pocket boroughs and rotten boroughs in the ways that the landed aristocracy manipulated the voting districts so that they would get more seats. Chartism. This is the first really big working class political movement in Britain. English city workers strived for universal manhood suffrage. Remember, there were 6 things that it strived for. That's the first. Universal manhood suffrage. 2, the secret ballot. 3, annual elections. 4, pay for members of parliament. And the removal of property qualifications for members of parliament. That's 5, I forgot what the 6th one is. All right, then that takes us to the chart, which is the last part of the And you see the name of the revolution, the leadership, the extremes, and the final outcome. And it's comparing and contrasting the glorious American, French, and Russian revolutions. It's a nice thing to have, actually. Okay? All right, so we're going to go one at a time. The glorious revolution is 1688. Really only lasted that long because there wasn't a lot to it. Okay? The causes were the 17th century struggle between the king and parliament, and the 17th century struggle between the Anglicans and the Puritans. Leadership, Whigs and Tories combined to oppose the king. Remember, this is the Stuarts we're talking about. The extremes was the treatment of dissenters and Catholics. Catholics, remember, were excluded via the Test Act. The final outcome was that government was balanced between king and parliament, which established the nature of modern England.
Can you repeat the leadership again?
Whigs and Tories combined to oppose the king.
What were the extremes?
The treatment of dissenters and Catholics. All right, American Revolution, the causes, the economic and political differences between American colonies and England. The leadership was Yankee and Virginian aristocrats. The extremes were the treatment of loyalists, and the outcome was American independence, the end of mercantilism, and the establishment of a classical republic.
Can you do leadership again, please?
The Yankee and Virginian aristocrats.
Is there nothing in that first column that just says
Yeah, you
revolution?
can draw little smiley faces if you want.
I will.
The French Revolution, the causes. All right, American Revolution, remember 1774 to about 1870 or 1783. The French Revolution, 1789 to 1815, I guess. Causes. Number one, inept monarchy and social antagonisms. And the money issue. All right, this one's kind of cool. Leadership first, aristocrats versus king in the first stage. Remember, taxes. Followed by middle class versus aristocracy, second stage, voting. Which in turn gave way to the rise of radicals and the mob. Followed by the Thermidorian reaction. That's leadership. Extremes. Conservative pro-monarchists, sometimes they were called emigres, versus radical Republicans, the Jacobins, with every shade of political spectrum in between. And the final outcome was Napoleon. All right, and then the fourth one, Russian Revolution. Causes. Autocratic czar, tremendously backward economy, crazy monk, failure in war. Leadership, middle-class intellectuals. In Russia, they were called the cadets or constitutional democrats, who were overthrown by the Bolsheviks. And then you could write like Kerensky yields to Lenin. Extremes, the whites versus the reds. And the final outcome is Soviet Union. All right, we've only been at it for 10 minutes, so I'm going to pass out this last. I told you this one's going to take 45 minutes if we look through it. Dude, you shut down. Help yourself. Thanks.
Thank you.